What's up, Jerry?
Not much. Top 10 countdown.
How was your week, man?
It's it's been a good week. Today's been kind of frustrating, but it's been a good week.
You know what they always say, man. Whenever, like, if you ever have like a frustrating day, as the old saying goes, just sometimes it'll do that, and so
Mhm.
that's all you can do, man.
100%, man.
Well, that's 100%. That's probably the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten.
Yes.
So, um, well, anyway, not that I don't care about how bad your day was, but I don't care about how bad your day was. So, having said that, are you ready to build a bar?
Let's do it.
All right. So usually, what we would do is I would ask you, what are you sipping on, and you would tell me, and we would go into the specifics of that specific bottle. But we're doing something a little bit different today,
Hmm.
and for the next probably 2 weeks. So
Yep.
why don't you enlighten us and give us a little bit of insight of what we're doing
Okay, so for this week and next week, I thought instead of us bringing a specific bottle to the table, I thought it's about time that we bring a craft bourbon or a craft product onto the bar. And so instead of picking out a craft product that only a few people would be able to get their hands on, I figured we would just spend this time talking about craft bourbon or craft whiskey in its entirety and the benefits of that. And you and I have agreed that for my episode and your episode, we will bring the closest. We agreed that we'll bring the closest craft product. We'll use that as an example, but it's
here?
not by any means to say that bottle or this bottle is what we're recommending you put on the table. It's just we're going to use these as examples of what the craft industry does. So with that, what I have, and the closest craft distillery to my house is Neeley Family Distillery. And so
Okay.
I have a bottle of their single barrel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, I have a bottle of their single barrel. And so that's what I'm using as my reference to craft into the craft industry.
Well, I have met them. I think they are wonderful people. I think their product is phenomenal, and so I will drink to that.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, brother. So I know that we are not getting into, like you said, the specifics of this is why this particular brand should be on the table. Um, but craft in general,
Mhm.
okay, as the whole genre of craft, why would it be beneficial for someone, say, living in Connecticut? Why would it be beneficial for them to have craft bourbon on their bar?
I felt like it's about time in our journey through all of the episodes and the products that we're putting on our bar. I felt like it was time that we need to give craft, so craft whiskey, its due. Um, and basically, so the reason you would want to put a craft bourbon or a craft whiskey on your bar is because it really tells the whole story. So whether it's bourbon or whether it's, anything else, it's going to tell the full story of that product. And so I'm just going to, from here on out, refer to it as bourbon because that's what I have, is I have a
Okay.
bourbon product. But, all the bourbons that we have on our bar so far, with the exception of one, which is Yellowstone, is sort of a craft product. Um, and so, but it's not craft in the way that we're going to present craft today. So I think to tell the full story, you need some craft product on your bar, and that craft actually tells a completely different story than those heritage brands. So that's why you would have it on your bar.
Good. That makes sense. I agree with that, man. I think that probably, if you kind of get down to the roots of it, um, and I don't mean to hijack your episode, but I
No,
do
no.
feel like it's necessary to say that even though these enterprises and these corporations and everything, they got to where they are making the flagships and the blending and all that stuff, it had to start from somewhere.
Mhm.
And because it started from somewhere, right, it was a hobby to them at one point. So everything started out as craft at one point.
Right.
And in a sense of craft, old school. So I love that. So what is special about craft bourbon?
So I think in the way the industry is set up today, we're for the sake of argument of this, or for the sake of discussion, we're going to break things up into craft and heritage. So heritage meaning, Old Forester, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, like all of these name brand, monster, top of the line, big industry companies. Those are your heritage brands. So, Wild Turkey, all those. And so those do what they do well. So when you think in terms of like Jim Beam, you can go anywhere on the planet and find a Jim Beam bottle. You can find a Jim Beam white label. You can find probably most anywhere on the planet. You can find some Jim Beam single barrel, some Jim Beam Devil's Cut, all their products you can probably find nationwide, if not worldwide. And what they do is good. What they produce is good. So years ago, when they weren't such a big company, they were on a smaller scale and they were trying to figure out what would work. And so the way bourbon was, say in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they were establishing what their niche in the bourbon industry is going to look like. Well, nowadays those guys are big enough that they're established, right? So in comes craft bourbon. And so you take a place like Neeley Family Distillery or any distillery that's close to your house. So I do want to point out too, really quickly, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but every state, even the District of Columbia, so 51 territories in America have craft distilleries. So looked it up today, and California has 190 craft distilleries. This was as of 2021.
Oh, wow.
Colorado is the top of the list. Not Colorado. California is the top of the list with 190 craft distilleries. Mississippi's the bottom with 4 craft distilleries. But every state has them. So when I'm pointing out these guys, these are the ones that are closest to my house. Think in terms of what's local to you, but they're going to tell the craft side of the story. So, and I'm not saying that their stories of like, I'm making it like my grandfather made it, or I'm doing it like this. It's not any different than say, Jim Beam's story, but what they have the ability to do that the big guys don't is they're working on such a small scale that they can try different experiments, and they can try different grains and different yeast strands, different aging techniques. They can try all these different things, and whether they're successful or not, they can move on to the next thing. So if they are successful, they can keep doing what they're doing. If they're not successful, they can move on to something else. And how that benefits the industry is once they find something that works, then once they've shown that it's worked on that scale and even kind of a larger scale, then the big guys, the heritage brands, they'll pick up on that and start doing some of that on a larger scale. So if you think about it in terms of the big heritage brands, they're producers. They're the ones that's just stocking shelves with thousands of barrels. You think of craft distilleries as they're the ones doing all the research. What are drinkers drinking now? And so also when you think about bourbon specifically, you think about, 50 years ago when bourbon was considered your granddad's drink or whatever, your dad's drink or whatever. Generally they picked one. So, your granddad might've been an Old Forester drink or an Old Forester or Old Crow drinker, and that was his brand that when he got home from work, he poured himself a glass of Old Crow and drank it, and that was it. Well, nowadays, what tends to be the trend is people want a variety of different things. So it might be that, I'm in the mood for this tonight, but I'm in the mood for Jim Beam White Label tomorrow night. And so what this affords is a lot of the research, and they're doing a lot of like edgy things that wouldn't been able to have been accomplished if craft distilleries weren't a thing. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, if you go like on a financial scale for Jim Beam, and I'm using them just as a generic example, they're a big corporation here. For them to try their hand at doing something like, whatever, I don't really have an example, and it flopped. That's probably about $1 million down the drain. And that's a significant hit to the corporation. Whereas I know that, like, okay, I got these craft guys at 25-gallon still, 50-gallon still. If it flops for them, you're out what, $1,500, $2,000, and right. I don't know the specifics, but okay, hey, we know for a fact this is tried and true and it works. Now Jim Beam and all these other corporations can do it, but they can't afford financially to do the craft thing. They can't afford financially to test. Because if they spend all this money on on something that flops, man, that's a significant hit to them. So yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense.
Before you get to the next question, I do want to say that here we are in 2023, and some of the big guys are starting to figure that out. Like Jim Beam, for instance, they just did spend millions of dollars redoing their distillery, and they have inside of the big Jim Beam distillery here in Kentucky, they have a craft, they have a craft offering. So they are going to be doing some craft stuff, and
okay,
they've never done it in the past. Some of the big guys have done stuff like this in the past, but it's just not like what their whole structure, their whole production structure is based on. Like a lot of these craft distillers, a lot of these craft distillers, the base of what they do is experimentation and seeing what works, and then they'll take off from there. Whereas Jim Beam and others may dabble in this, that's still not their main focus. Their main focus is getting out their flagship products and all that. So but so
that makes sense. Yeah, but I had no idea.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Okay, but with craft though, like craft versus say heritage or whatever, isn't craft just more expensive?
Generally speaking, craft is a little more expensive, and there's a few reasons for that. The main reason is, if you are the grain or the buyer for a place like Jim Beam, you're buying 5 truckloads of corn for your product, whereas me, I'm a craft distiller. I'm only buying a couple 100 pounds of corn or whatever it is, and so just based on economics, I'm going to be paying more for what I get because I'm buying it at such a smaller quantity. And so therefore, I am going to have to charge more per bottle. But I think the way I look at it is whenever I go to the store, say I have no idea what I want, I just want to see what's out there. And, I look through, scan through, and I see all my tried and trues for my heritage brands, and I know what I'm expecting to pay for that. And then I see some, craft product that maybe I haven't seen before, or maybe I've never, had a chance to buy it. And I'm looking at paying, say, $20 or $30 more per bottle. It doesn't occur to me, I don't think in terms of like, well, crap, this is $20 more. I'm not interested in that. It's because the way I look at it is you're not only investing in the smaller, company, you're buying local, as people say, but you're also, it's a lot of, what you're investing in is the research that is going to pay out in some way, shape, or form later. So I look at it like that. And so I don't ever look at it like, man, I could get a bottle of, whatever heritage brand flagship product for, $20, and here they're asking 50 for this. So I don't ever look at it in terms of that. I just look at it like, yes, it cost them a little more to produce at a smaller quantity, but you're also paying for research, a lot more, a different type of research than you are mostly with the heritage brands.
Years ago, and I actually think that probably you and I have had this conversation very early on in your bourbon connoisseurship, I should say. But I've always likened this specific thing to, like, I can go to the store and buy cookies, but if I go to Mimi's house and I get cookies, night and day. Not saying anything towards the bourbon industry, so that's not to be misconstrued, but those homemade, there's a little bit difference. And so, yeah, absolutely. I fully understand what you're saying. You were talking about earlier, the corn and quantity. All right. You had mentioned the quantity aspect, but is there any truth to the idea that craft is a lesser quality than heritage brand?
No, just like you were saying with the cookies. So you think about, you can go to the store at any point in time and buy a pack of Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookies, and they're good. You know what to expect. You also know you could go to Texas or California or Rhode Island or Florida and buy a pack of Chips Ahoy cookies, and they're going to taste exactly the same. They're going to taste like Chips Ahoy cookies. But don't you like going to your grandmother's house and eating her chocolate chip cookies, or, going to somebody's house who, has made up some homemade chocolate chip cookies? It's just different. It tastes different. It's on a different level. Not saying that it's, the Chips Ahoy cookies are terrible. They're not, but they are mass produced. They've spent years getting their recipe down. Now it's down. They know how to mass produce it, but there's something about eating homemade chocolate chip cookies. And so the same for like this bourbon and stuff, I don't think it's lesser quality at all. And I'm not going to say it's greater quality, but what I am going to say is, when you think in terms of, the millions of people that work at these heritage brands, and, they go in and day out, they, if my job is to be a production distiller at, say, Jim Beam, my job, I know, is to go in every day, load the corn, cook it, be done with it. That's what I do day in and day out. However, if I own a craft distillery, I am probably going to put a little bit more love into my recipe, because I'm trying to make something that differs myself from the rest of the, the rest of the group, the rest of the industry. I'm trying to make something that, and to be honest with you, mine has to be good or I'm out of business. If Jim Beam puts out a bad batch of bourbon, you buy which this probably would never happen, but you buy a bad bottle of Jim Beam white label, you'll just chalk it up to like, oh, that's weird that tastes bad. Let me get another one. But if I'm buying Neeley Family Distillery for the first time and it tastes horrible, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get on Facebook and tell everybody how horrible their distillery is and whatever. So I think to some degree, these guys have to work a lot harder to make sure that their products are as homemade and as, homemade cookie-ish as they can have it. Now don't hear me wrong. I have tasted, and I will never say names, but I've tasted some really bad whiskey. And the reason I would never name names is because I don't think there's such thing as bad whiskey. It just wasn't my profile. I don't know whose profile it would fit, but there are things that I taste from even the heritage brands, but there are things I taste and it's like, ugh, that is not for me. But that doesn't mean it's bad. That just means that's not for me. But these guys put just as these guys and girls put just as much, into what they do as everybody else. So, yeah, I definitely don't think it's a lesser quality at all.
And see, that's kind of where I'm at with all of this as well. Is I like artistry. Um, and I think that this is an art. I think it's fun. It's an art, but I also liken this as well to and music aspect. For those of you that don't know, like these songs that are on the radio, they have what's called writing, I guess, venues or classes or workshops, and they go and they mass produce thousands of songs over the course of like a 10-day course or whatever. Then they record them and they spit them out.
Right.
But when you have somebody that writes their own music, to me, it's like, man, that hits so much more home. I like that a little more. And so, not saying that I don't like, heritage bourbon at all. I do like a little more probably on the craft side because you can taste the hard work that goes into it.
Right, right.
I love that stuff. And to be honest with you, I probably don't drink it as much as I would like to, because it is a little more expensive because of the work and the research and all that stuff. Market research, the whole nine, all that stuff goes into that. And sometimes I don't have the $50 for a bottle. Sometimes I only have the $12.99 at the shop at.
Right.
You know. So anyway, I mean, that's just a couple of things to think about. So when I do get this, it's a treat.
Sure.
Okay, so if somebody was looking for quality craft bourbon outside of the state of Kentucky, how hard would that be to find?
So like I said a little bit earlier, I looked it up actually just today to make sure I was right on this, but every state has craft distilleries, and only four of them are in the single digits. So only 4 of 51, and I say 51 because there's 50 states and the District of Columbia. Only 4 of those are in the single digits of craft distilleries. And then, like I said, this was as of 2021. So we're a couple years behind that. So it's probably even higher than that now. But every state has multiple craft distilleries. So it would not be hard at all to go and find a craft distillery around you, see what they make, get involved in the local scene and get involved in, buying local, drinking local, and putting a bottle of something local on your bar. And, we've talked about before, when we said, why should we put this on there? A lot of times what we said in the past on the other episodes is one of the things is it's a good talking point. So yeah, so it's a good talking point when somebody that doesn't live in Kentucky comes and looks at my bar and they go, what is this Neeley Family Distillery? What is that? And then I have a story to tell. Oh, they're right up the road. They're 5 minutes up the road. And here's some history about their distillery. Here's kind of what they do that's different. For instance, one of the things that I love about what they do is as of now, as of the moment that we're spitting this out, they only produce single barrel strength bourbons. So when you go in their distillery to buy a bottle of their bourbon, you can be guaranteed, as of now, as of January 15th, 2023, you can guarantee that it's going to be single barrel strength. And, Becca Sue Neeley, who's Royce's wife, he's the owner. She's the single barrel curator. I can guarantee that she's tasted them through. She's picked out the best of the best. And that's what they have to offer. Not all of them are like that. All of them have different things that they do. I just found a distillery yesterday, as a matter of fact, that's right outside of Kentucky in Ohio. And I went and visited them yesterday. And one of the cool things they do is they're about blending. And so they do this thing where you can either go there and do the experience, you can order the kit and take it home and do the experience yourself, or they have an app on their phone that you can answer a bunch of questions about what kind of bourbon you like. And then it spits out this specific recipe. You can then go back to the distillery, give them your recipe code, and they will basically print you out a bottle of bourbon based off of that recipe code. and your bottle is one of a kind. And so, no other distillery that I know of is doing that. So, all that to say is go to your local craft distilleries, because they're all doing something different. It may be a specific grain mash bill that they use, or it may be a specific process, but I guarantee you can find a craft distillery that's doing something completely different than everybody else. And so that right there is important enough to get involved in the craft movement.
Doing the craft thing here. So Rocktown is Arkansas's craft distillery, one of them. And I'll get into that in mine. But they are kind of getting a little bigger now, but used to, I think you were up here in 2017 whenever we toured them and we got a chance to talk to them and things like that. It's cool to actually get involved with our local distillery. And what I mean by that is, like, they used to offer, like, Friday nights, man. You could go up there and, of course you couldn't distill or mash in or anything like that. But, they produced. And so one of the benefits was they would get pizza for Friday nights, and you were allowed 2 cocktails. And what you did was you bottled and labeled, throughout the course of the night. And so not only pizza and the cocktails were free, and I think you actually got a free bottle out of it as well. But it's kind of cool because you get to go to this local craft distillery. And this is I don't know if everybody else does that or not, but it was a cool thing here because you could go up there on Friday nights, just sit and talk and have a drink and eat some pizza and help them out. It was a local bonding thing. And so, sometimes whenever I do taste a specific bourbon that they make, these are the ones that I know we did the corn talk with them. And sometimes when I taste a specific bourbon that they used to make, I kind of go back to that point of, like, man, that was cool whenever we would go and help bottle and eat pizza and have a pour with them. That was fun. I enjoyed that. So, not everyone offers that. However, I went into, and I'm going to use your example, I went in and I met Royce and Becca, and I thought that, not knowing me from Adam, chances of me coming back up there but they were the nicest people. And I would say probably ambassadors of what every craft bourbon or craft distillery should be. Welcoming. They had a sense of humor. We talked. Just human beings, decent human beings. And I think that's cool.
And to be fair, across the board, of all the distilleries, craft distilleries that I've been into, and Kentucky sure has their fair share of them. I can't recall an instance where I've gone into a distillery and I was just treated like crap or, whatever. So they all seem to do a fairly decent job of, making you feel welcome, making you feel whatever. So and that certainly has to be part of it. So I don't know if you have anything else, but before we decide that we're going to put craft bourbon on our bar or not, I think we need to pause this conversation. And we have a whole nother segment that we want to do on craft bourbon. And wait till we get through that segment before we decide for sure if we're going to put craft bourbon on our bar.
But I think we should toast in a as like an agreement to decide later on.
Yeah, I have to put a little bit more in here.
That's fine. Just this is to agree later on that we're
to agree later on.
Yes. I love it. Well, dude, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I would say that I'll see you next week. But I think that we are going to continue this.
Yes, we are. And
all right.
I think, is that Maverick that's enjoying himself back there?
I have paused this and I've muted this 4 times and said, I don't know if you saw me like turn around, but I'm like, shut up.
No, Maverick is
rabbit, but
Maverick is just as much a part of this as anybody else. So don't get on to him.
He is a part of this, and there's a craft rabbit behind our fence that he is he's not going towards it, but him and Nigel are.
Yeah, they just want to make sure that he stays away and doesn't kill the family.
That's right, because rabbits, I don't. For those of you that don't know, here in Arkansas, we've had mass rabbits that go around murdering families.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we are protected.
All right, man. Well, until next time, I love you, and we will
love you.
The conversation.
Absolutely.
All right, homie.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you heard tonight, check us out on these social media platforms. Just search for My Journey Through the American Spirits. Also, check us out on our new website,